Right now there is someone in your world who smiles at you and quietly measures how much of you they can control. Not because they are powerful, but because you still care whether they approve. The game only works on the man who needs to be liked. The second you bury that hunger, you stop being something they can steer and become something they cannot touch. You stop speaking just to be acknowledged. You stop adjusting just to be accepted. You stop shrinking so others feel tall. You grow silent. You grow deliberate. You grow unpredictable. In a culture obsessed with pulling emotional strings, the man who has no strings becomes untouchable. They prefer you agreeable, softened at the edges, easy to digest. That is how influence is extracted. From childhood you were conditioned to smile when irritated, nod when unconvinced, agree before thinking. They applauded compliance and called it maturity. They praised restraint when you ignored your own instincts. But that was never maturity. It was submission disguised as virtue. And when you step outside that script, something shifts in their eyes. Not confusion. Fear. Machiavelli never authored a guidebook on popularity. He outlined the architecture of respect. And the first principle of that architecture is immunity to disappointment. You must be prepared to let them frown. Let them misinterpret. Let them withdraw. Because the moment they realize their approval shapes your behavior, they sculpt you. They apply pressure. They apply guilt. They apply silence like a weapon. But when you no longer twitch under that pressure, when praise and criticism weigh the same, you become fixed. You stop chasing comfort and start building gravity. Men revolve around those who do not revolve around anyone. Their craving for validation makes them readable. Your detachment makes you formidable. If applause is unnecessary, performance becomes optional. If belonging is not required, compromise loses its leverage. The instant they recognize that your emotional climate is self-regulated, you begin to set the temperature of every room you enter. Your power is not rebellion. It is restraint. The ability to decline without an essay. To exit without a scene. To choose what is necessary even when it costs popularity. Most men are tethered by invisible threads spun from apologies and forced smiles. You sever the thread and continue forward. You were never meant to be domesticated. They will label you distant, arrogant, difficult. That is the language reserved for men who refuse to be maneuvered. That is what is said when kindness no longer grants access. There is a line between cruelty and clarity. You do not wound. You simply refuse to be handled. You do not lunge. You step back. You do not react. You hold position. Stillness. That composure unsettles them because their usual tools fail. The hooks do not catch. The bait lies untouched. The words that once redirected you dissolve in quiet. And inside that quiet they confront a realization. You were never under their command. You allowed them to believe you were. The show has ended. The costume is gone. What remains is a presence they cannot categorize but instinctively respect. You owe them nothing. Not reassurance. Not explanation. Not comfort. What you owe is allegiance to yourself. Freedom from the exhausting theater of constant approval. Freedom from explaining decisions that require no vote. Freedom from being liked by those who would never sacrifice for you. When the need to please is buried, something cleaner takes its place. Alignment. Self-respect. From that clarity emerges a second evolution. You become difficult to read. They study your pauses, your tone, your timing, searching for signals. But you no longer distribute your thoughts freely. Access is restricted. And unpredictability unsettles those who rely on control for security. In their world, influence equals safety. You have stepped outside that equation. Machiavelli understood that perception governs power, and silence governs perception. When justification disappears, speculation begins. When performance ends, projection fills the space. And projection breeds fascination. You have not altered your essence. You have altered the lens through which they view you by refusing the role they assigned. The hunger to please is a subtle dependency. It converts your worth into something others can validate or withhold. One raised eyebrow weakens you. One passive remark redirects you. They press the exact nerve because you revealed its location. Every time you requested reassurance, you handed them leverage. Now that leverage is gone. Not because you fought harder, but because you detached deeper. Emotional distance becomes your discipline. You offer enough to command respect, never enough to create reliance. Your time is not automatic. Your presence is selective. Your praise is scarce and therefore valuable. They begin to approach you differently. Half legend, half reflection. They glimpse in you what they desire yet cannot direct. That tension draws them back. You are no longer cast in their narrative. You author your own. And your script is precise. It removes distraction. It eliminates manipulation. It silences drain. You do not broadcast dominance. You imply it through absence. Withdrawal becomes consequence. Presence becomes reward. They cannot forecast your response, so they regulate their behavior. When you eliminate the urge to please, your agreement carries mass. It is not assumed. It is granted. Rooms quiet when you speak because you are no longer negotiating for validation. Curiosity replaces politeness. What will he decide? What will he tolerate? What does he value? And the answer remains consistent. Only what aligns with his mission. Guilt no longer controls you. Guilt is a chain forged by those who lack persuasion and resort to shame. Shame loses power over a man who has confronted himself. You have examined your flaws without collapsing under them. You have judged yourself and rendered a verdict. Their opinions cannot penetrate what you have already faced. That self-forgiveness becomes armor. Now you move with the composure of a prince shaped by strategy rather than applause. Measured when required, generous by decision, intimidating by intention. Your emotional range is no longer ammunition others can fire back at you. It has become an instrument set in your own hands. Warmth is no longer automatic. It is granted after proof. Compassion is no longer a bargaining chip. It is a conscious allocation. Your kindness has shifted from reflex to strategy, and strategy can be adjusted or removed without apology. They will probe you. They will test the edges of this new composure. The world grows uncomfortable when what it once controlled begins to cut its own cords. Expect silence used as pressure. Expect exclusion used as leverage. Expect accusations disguised as concern. You have changed. You have become distant. You have lost your softness. You do not defend. You do not clarify. You let their discomfort expand. Because each attempt to drag you back into the old pattern only reinforces a lesson. You are no longer adjustable. In their narrative you become the antagonist, and you accept the role without flinching. To them, villain means inaccessible. It means the lever no longer moves the machine. You reflect their lack of control back at them, and that reflection stings. So they label you. Let them construct their version of events while you construct your life. Here is the reversal they never anticipate. When approval is no longer your currency, the right alliances emerge. Men who respect limits. Men who recognize discipline. Men who do not require your submission to feel significant. They are not looking to maneuver you. They are looking to build beside you. Without confrontation, without announcement, your environment reorganizes itself. Desperation fades. Strength remains. Machiavelli observed that favors are forgotten quickly while wounds are remembered precisely. Chasing approval may buy temporary warmth, but it plants long-term disregard. Distance, however, cultivates intrigue. And intrigue sustains authority. They never access your entirety. They encounter fragments, moments, controlled exposures. You remain near enough to observe yet far enough to remain untouched. That space must be guarded like a throne room. Your quiet becomes regalia. Your composure becomes shield. Your absence becomes folklore. You did not pursue influence. You embodied it. You did not request respect. You demonstrated independence from the need for it. Now conversations lower when you enter. Not because you command silence, but because your presence alters the air. When they attempt to bait you with flattery or guilt, you remain unmoved. The most formidable men are rarely the loudest. They are the ones no longer competing. You stopped exchanging integrity for approval. You stopped diluting truth to make others comfortable. That shift unsettles them. Not because you dominate them, but because their usual mechanisms fail. Shame does not penetrate. Withdrawal does not provoke panic. Praise does not inflate. Everything they once used dissolves on contact. You are not detached in the sense of coldness. You are refined. The parts of you that once negotiated for validation have been removed. In their place stands someone steady enough to leave without spectacle. That steadiness creates pull. The less you require them, the more attention you command. You are no longer easily accessed. You are experienced, not possessed. Observed, not decoded. Admired and questioned at the same time. When control is impossible, fascination begins. Not because you overextended yourself, but because you mastered restraint. You offer less than expected, and that scarcity amplifies value. You speak sparingly and they analyze extensively. You act minimally and they react intensely. Their emotional climate begins adjusting to yours. Attention toward you increases not because it is freely available, but because it is limited. In a culture saturated with oversharing, restraint becomes sacred. They interpret your silence as meaning. They replay your departures. They examine your returns. They attempt to decipher a pattern that no longer serves them. You have become complexity wrapped in simplicity. They attempt to calculate you because their sense of self is now entangled with whether you approve. Yet your approval answers only to your own internal standard. What do you call a man who does not pursue, does not justify, does not fracture under pressure? Memorable. Dangerous. Unmanageable. At this level something subtle shifts. Conversations adjust when you arrive. Words are chosen carefully. Not because you demand it, but because you conditioned it. Through restraint. Through unpredictability. Through controlled absence. You became a mirror. They no longer focus on you. They see themselves reflected in your composure. This is command without volume. Authority without aggression. Your restraint resembles royalty. No physical crown required. It is carried in posture. And posture communicates more than speeches. Not conflict. Not volume. Restraint. The pause before response. The lack of reaction where one was expected. The effortless continuation as if nothing occurred. Because from your perspective, nothing of importance did. Their emotional theatrics no longer intersect with your priorities. They escalate efforts. Increased apologies. Amplified praise. Dramatic vulnerability. Attempting to reopen a door that was never fully open. Access was temporary. It was evaluation. They misunderstood it as entitlement. The principle remains unspoken yet enforced. If they assume your loyalty is automatic, they disqualify themselves. They will ask when you shifted. They will search for the moment they lost influence. They never possessed it. They interacted with a version designed to cope, not to command. When that version dissolved, sovereignty emerged. You are not harsh. You are purified. Cleansed of dependency. Cleansed of compulsive accommodation. No longer bending for attention but standing as a reference point. This is why explanation weakens authority. The need to be understood invites scrutiny. Mystery sustains stature. What cannot be fully interpreted cannot be easily diminished. Let them speculate. Let them misread. Let them project. While they analyze, you advance. People admire what they cannot label. They pursue what refuses to be possessed. You have become that paradox. Not by coincidence, but by construction. You turned yourself into something layered, glimpses instead of explanations, outlines instead of open books. They feel there is more beneath the surface. They lean in. They try to decode. But they never quite arrive. If you truly want to erase the impulse to please, you must abandon the urge to be understood. Allow them to misread you. Allow them to mistake restraint for indifference. Allow them to project their fears onto your silence. Their judgments expose their insecurity. Your restraint exposes your discipline. Their feelings are not your responsibility. Their unease is not a bill you owe. Their expectations are not commands carved in stone. The moment that truth settles in your spine, your voice changes. You no longer speak to soften the room. You speak only when silence would compromise your standards. And in that moment, the power equation rearranges itself. They recognize that your focus is intentional. Your time is deliberate. Your words carry weight because they are rare. Everything you do is calibrated to who you are becoming. If someone wants access to that world, they must elevate themselves to enter it. You do not step down to be more digestible. You remain where you are and let them decide whether they are willing to rise. Most will not. Most will withdraw, offended that you refuse to compress yourself for their comfort. Let them withdraw. Their exit confirms your direction. You did not lose them. You refined your circle. And the few who remain, who stretch, who evolve, carry a permanent imprint of your standard. What you offer is scarce in an age of constant exposure and cheap validation. Controlled generosity. You invest only where peace compounds. Anything that fractures it is removed quietly. Those who crave constant inclusion are easy to manipulate. But you no longer crave entry into every room. You are the room. Access to you is no longer assumed, it is evaluated. The dynamic has reversed. Now they measure themselves against your boundaries. They fear losing proximity not merely because of your qualities, but because of who they become in your presence. That is the evolution. You stopped seeking calm from others. You became the source of it. You wear it like an invisible shield, like gravity that steadies everything around you. They cannot maneuver you anymore. Not because you memorized every tactic, but because you matured beyond the need for the game. They label you distant, proud, unreachable, and each label is confirmation that you refuse to shrink. You were never designed to be easily consumed. You were built to carry weight. Let your quiet unsettle them. Let your composure challenge them. You are no longer a supporting role in someone else's narrative. You are the turning point they didn't anticipate because you severed the reflex to seek approval. In doing so, you embodied something timeless, a presence unbound, a strategist without visible chains, a legend shaped by restraint. Untouchable not because you concealed your heart, but because you disciplined it. You do not reject connection. You simply refuse to chase it. Your affection is no longer automatic. It is secured, guarded, accessed by merit. You changed the emotional marketplace. While others scatter attention carelessly, you treat yours as currency backed by principle. Your time is guarded. Your presence must be earned through integrity, not flattery. At first, they misinterpret it. They assume you are merely reserved. But gradually they discover the usual tactics fail. Charm intensifies. Compliments multiply. Gestures become theatrical. Still, you remain steady because you are not searching for applause. You are assessing substance. You are verifying that what stands before you is not another performance seeking validation. You no longer crave approval, you shape reality by example. Without announcing it, you influence. Without persuading, you redirect. You live in alignment, and others either calibrate themselves or drift away. Those who choose to stay begin adjusting, not because you demanded it, but because they sense your consistency. You have become a fixed point in a shifting world. They feel both inspired and unsettled around you. You operate like a mirror that reflects without commentary. Your standards speak through posture, through measured listening, through your willingness to withdraw when mediocrity tries to attach itself. And the lesson becomes undeniable. Detachment is not isolation. It is authority over self. You replace the hunger for validation with alignment to principle. You do not require confirmation of your worth. You embody it. You do not wait for applause after decisive action. The action itself is enough. Agreement is optional. Your path does not bend to consensus. Gradually, they realize their praise, their criticism, their emotional fluctuations strike you and fall away. Not because you are numb, but because you are refined. Emotional precision is strength. You experience fully, yet you remain anchored. You care without chasing. You love without pleading. You give from abundance, not scarcity. And that is why they return. Not because you satisfied every desire, but because you confronted them with themselves. You did not entertain illusions. You illuminated them. In your presence, they saw who they could be, and who they currently are. That memory lingers. Your name becomes associated with elevation, with tension, with growth. When they hear it, they recall the sharper version of themselves that surfaced around you. You are not a closed chapter. You are the unresolved page they revisit in quiet moments. They replay conversations, searching for another opportunity. But you no longer script your life around their reactions. You move in silence, in absence, in standards that do not negotiate. They will test boundaries. They will apologize. They will display vulnerability. Some will mimic transformation. But you have learned to distinguish substance from spectacle. Real change endures under pressure. Performance dissolves when applause fades. And most people cannot maintain the discipline required to remain close to someone who refuses to be played. So you release them. Not out of bitterness, not in a blaze of emotion, but with calculated calm. You remove their noise the way a surgeon removes a tumor, steady hands, no hesitation. There is no announcement, no dramatic finale. You simply act. And that quiet execution imprints deeper than any argument ever could. Because your farewell is never a performance. It is a disappearance. And when absence is chosen from strength, it becomes myth. You are no longer someone they try to define. You are someone they bring up in lowered voices. A name spoken with a mix of respect and unease. They were different. I can't explain it. I just felt exposed around them. That's what happens when a man refuses to shrink. Others feel the distance between who they present and who they truly are. You didn't criticize them. You didn't lecture. You simply stood at your full height. That is how you become unforgettable. You exit without noise. You leave air behind that feels altered. Rooms remember you. Conversations bend toward you long after you're gone. They step into new connections carrying a quiet comparison. But no one else holds eye contact the same way. No one else carries silence like you. Your departures become your signature. Sharp. Clean. Undebatable. They cannot manipulate you anymore because they no longer understand the structure you operate from. You are not another player at their table. You design the table. You don't gamble for position. You define the terms of engagement. Understanding from them is optional. Keeping pace is mandatory. So you stop reaching out to fill gaps. You stop responding to half-effort. You stop translating your boundaries into softer language. There is only one code now. Alignment. If something clashes with your frequency, it dissolves on its own. They feel the shift immediately. Anxiety creeps in. But by then, it's already done. You may still be physically present, but your energy has withdrawn. And nothing unsettles like a man who has emotionally stepped back. Never explain your evolution. Explanations are privileges. Not everyone earned access to your growth. Those who stayed stagnant do not receive the blueprint of your transformation. Let them speculate. Let them question. Your rise becomes their lesson. Their regret becomes the receipt for your standards. As Machiavelli understood, the most formidable presence is not the loudest voice in the room. It is the controlled silence that shifts the atmosphere. That is who you have become. They enter spaces hoping to see you, even if pride prevents them from admitting it. They compare new faces to yours without meaning to. They dissect old conversations, searching for hidden meanings. You have transcended being just a person to them. You've become an idea. And ideas do not chase approval. Ideas are either respected or feared. Sometimes both. This is your elevation. From validation seeker to sovereign presence. From eager pleaser to unreadable authority. From asking to be accepted to being impossible to forget. They won't forget you because you didn't just silence the urge to please. You dismantled the identity built around it. You were never designed for mass approval. You were built for impact. Eventually, you reach a place where detachment is no longer effort. You realize you were never truly dependent on their reactions. The dynamic doesn't disappear. You simply stop submitting to its rules. What they once labeled as distance, they now interpret as command. What they once mocked, they now envy. What they once criticized, they now study. This is not rebellion against your past. It is deletion. The version of you that survived by being agreeable was armor for a different season. But survival is no longer the objective. Mastery is. Not mastery over them. Mastery over your impulses. Over the need to be needed. Over the craving for applause. You have grown beyond it. Now they observe you carefully, unsure whether to approach or retreat. You move like controlled weather, calm until you decide otherwise. And when you act, it is decisive. No debates. No dramatic exits. Just removal. You don't threaten departure. You embody it. And that vacuum lingers. They struggle to explain the emptiness. They say you changed. No. You revealed what was always there. You removed the agreeable disguise and exposed the authority underneath. Authority does not justify itself. It simply stands. Occasionally, someone will attempt to resurrect the older version of you. They'll remind you of who you used to be. Softer. More accessible. Easier to manage. They will try to anchor you to a narrative that favored them. But you won't even entertain it. That identity was retired without ceremony. Now your presence alone communicates standards. Your posture sets boundaries. Your silence delivers verdicts. You are no longer seeking absolution or approval. You operate from internal clarity. They don't know what to do with someone who doesn't collapse under guilt. They are accustomed to people mistaking submission for humility. But your humility is controlled strength. It is restraint sharpened by self-awareness. It is knowing your value so deeply that you never need to broadcast it. They experiment. They withdraw to see if you chase. They provoke to see if you react. They flatter to see if you soften. Nothing moves you. Not because you are cold, but because you are anchored. Stillness can feel gentle until someone tests its weight. A man who does not need to be liked cannot be steered. You are no longer reflecting their insecurities back to them. You are highlighting the contrast. And contrast forces reflection. Their performances feel thin next to your authenticity. Their attempts at validation look desperate beside your self-containment. They realize you were never blending in. You were observing, calculating, learning. And now you've exited the arena without asking permission. Obsession grows around what cannot be decoded. You are not confusing. You are consistent. But consistency in a world of masks feels mysterious. You are not withholding yourself out of fear. You are reserving yourself out of discernment. Access now requires maturity. The door they once walked through casually is sealed. Not to create longing, but because standards evolved. Presence fades with time. Memory intensifies. And you chose to become unforgettable rather than available. Control is not seized through dominance. It is secured through irreplaceability. You position yourself as the benchmark they search for in others and fail to find. You do not compete for attention. You redefine what attention means. You become the internal comparison they cannot silence. Your detachment is not cruelty. It is precision. You remove what threatens your future the way a craftsman removes flawed material. Not to punish the wood, but to protect the structure. You do not separate to cause pain. You separate to prevent decay. And in that act, you demonstrate a truth most fear to confront. Real love is not blind compliance. It sees clearly. And sometimes it chooses to walk away anyway.